All right, so we left off doing these 5 steps to try to determine whether or not we have any outliers. Now, an outlier is a number that is farther away from all of our data points right here than it should be, farther away from our min or max. That's what it is. It's going to be a number that's too low to be a reasonable min or max. And it's always going to be, the outlier is always going to be either your minimum value or your maximum value, because it's going to be one of those extremes. So we're not really checking for the numbers in the middle. We're checking for these two numbers or one of these numbers, an outlier. And we found the IQR, and if we did it by hand, the IQR was 45. If you use StatCrunch, you're going to get a different IQR, and don't worry, I have that one all worked out. So it will match StatCrunch. I'll show you that in just a second. Then you take your IQR, you multiply it by 1.5. This is going to give us our okay, our reasonable boundary finder. Okay, so this is going to be our okay. It's okay to be this far away. So you go to Q1 and you back up 67.5. So that means we subtract. You go to Q1, which was 193 if we did it by hand. Remember, we found 193 by hand. And we subtract the 67.5, and that comes out to be 125.5. That's our reasonable minimum. And then we're going to ask ourselves in just a minute, do we have a number smaller than that? And yes, we do. We have 110, and that's going to be our outlier. But now let's go ahead and find our reasonable max. You take your Q3 plus your okay number, so that's 238 plus 67.5, and that says that we can have it's reasonable to have a maximum value that's as big as 305.5. So now to determine whether or not you have an outlier, you ask yourself 2 questions. And question number 1 is, do we have any numbers smaller than 125.5? That's the first question. And we say yes, 110. So since the answer was yes, then this one right here is our outlier. Our other question is, do we have any numbers, and you can have more than one outlier, do we have any numbers bigger than 305.5? And the answer is no. So since we didn't have any numbers any bigger, then we'd only have this one outlier. Any number smaller than 105? Yes, it was 110. Now what that means is that 110 is the outlier, and since it's the outlier, it cannot be the minimum. It's the outlier, not the minimum. And since it cannot be the minimum, we have to now award the new lowest number the minimum. Okay, and then we want to make sure that 187 is not smaller than 125, and it's not. So we can use 187 as the new minimum. So now we have a new minimum. Minimum is 187. We have Q1 is 193. We have Q2 is 228. And we have Q3 is 238, and we have our max is 264. All right, so now what we have to do is we're going to generate what's called a box and whisker plot. And a box and whisker plot is called a box and whisker plot because it is made up of a rectangle, which we call the box. And I'm just kind of demonstrating what it is right here. I'm going to draw the actual one down here. We're going to have a box, and one side of the box is going to be at 193. The other side of the box is going to be at 238. So we're Q1 and Q3 are the ends of our box. Q2 is going to get a line in the middle of the box, or wherever 228 is. And then we're going to have whiskers, which are just going to be lines that come out and go to these 2 endpoints. So this is a quick sketch of what a box and whisker plot looks like, but it's not being plotted on a scaled number line, so I've got to do that down here. Now, the students really struggle with getting a proper scale. So, the basic guidelines is you've got to pick a scale right here that will allow you to get everything plotted. All of these numbers have to fit on this piece of your number line. Remember, the number lines go on forever in each direction, so we're just looking at a piece of our number line. I chose to start mine at 100 and count by 15s. I'll kind of show you a quick little formula. If you're not sure how to do this way will always work. Take your biggest number in your data set and the smallest number in your data set, find the difference between them, that's the range, and then take the number of tick marks that you have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 tick marks. That gave me 12 minus 1. Divide that 154 by 11, and then take your number and always round up. Okay, so when you divide that by 11, you get 14. That's why I chose 15. I started it a little bit beyond because I knew I would have some extra room, but if you had started it right here at 110, then all of your numbers would fit by using by 15. So, and then what I did on my calculator, I just said, this isn't a really quick way. I did I started it at 100. I started mine at 100, and then I said plus 15, and I pressed enter. Okay, and then I said plus 15 one more time. Notice I didn't have to put the answer in. So I'm going to have a tick mark at 100, a tick mark at 115, a tick mark at 130, and then I can just press enter on my calculator, and it keeps adding 15 to it. So that's how I got my tick marks. And I counted how many times I pressed enter to make sure that I didn't go beyond the 12 tick marks. Anyway, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this scaled number line to plot this same stuff. So I need to find out where 187 is. Well, I know 187 is somewhere in between here, and then halfway between there is like 182. So I'm going to guesstimate that 187 is somewhere in there. Now, as long as you're in between the right two numbers and kind of closer to the appropriate end, I'm not going to be real particular about that. But 187, okay, my apologies for the doorbell ringing. That was my kiddo being aggravated because the garage door wasn't open. So anyway, I plotted the point when, I didn't forget the 110. The 110 is going to be an outlier, and I'll deal with that at the end. But this one right here, this was the 187, and it gets just a dot, okay? Then we're going to find 193, and 193 should just be a little bit beyond 190. So that's going to get a vertical line because it's going to be part of my my box. Okay, so I'm going to make this be a vertical line. I'll connect it to my other pieces in just a second. All right, so the Q2 is 228. So here's 220 and 235. So halfway between there is going to be 227-ish. So 228 is going to be right about the halfway mark. I'm going to put another vertical line that's about like this. I'm going to connect this and make a box here in just a second. And then 238, so 42 is about halfway in the middle, so 38 is going to be just shy of being halfway. Okay, so there's the pieces that I need for my rectangle. Okay. And then 264 is going to be right before the 265, and it gets a dot. And then here, so here's the box, and here's the whiskers. And it says construct a box plot. So there's the box plot using an appropriate scale. I used an appropriate scale. You might be thinking that, well, it's not very appropriate because all of this information down here is, all of this is piece of the graph is not being used, but that's because 110, which is our outlier, is way down here. So this is, and I'm going to label this outlier, and this is our new minimum, and I'd go ahead and number it 187. It's not absolutely necessary, but I want to show you that the 187 is appropriately placed. And then this is Q1, and this is Q2, and this is Q3, and this is the maximum. And this happened at, where was that? 187. This is 193. Squeeze that in there. This is Q2 is 228. So we've got 228 squeezed in there. 238. I wish all of this information hadn't taken up so much room. But so here's this box and whisker plot, okay, with the new min, Q1, Q2, Q3. Is the data skewed left or is it skewed right? The easiest way to figure out which direction is it skewed is find which is bigger, the distance from Q2 to the minimum or the distance of Q2 to the maximum. And sometimes you can just look at it and tell, is this distance longer than this distance? Now, if you can't tell by looking, because it's pretty close, you got more inside the box here, and you got a shorter tail or a shorter whisker, and your whisker's longer over here, but Q2 is really close to Q3, so you might have to do some subtraction. So how far apart is 228 and 187? How far apart are those? 228 and 187, I believe, is a distance of 41. And then how far apart are 265 and 228? 265 and 228 are 36 units apart. So this one is bigger, so we're going to say it's skewed to the left. Okay, now I have already, let's see, where did I do this? Oh, here we go. I want to show you how to do all of that on StatCrunch, but before we do it on StatCrunch, I want to show you that I went back and redid it the way StatCrunch does it. I did, when I found the Q1, I included that 228 in my group of numbers, so I got a middle number right there. So all of this is exactly the same, and I'm moving fast over this because you can pause the video and write it down and let it sink in. But I found Q1 and Q3. I found the IQR. I multiplied the IQR by 1.5. So this is the number that's okay. You can be this far away from Q1 and Q3. So I backed up from Q1 and found my reasonable minimum number. This is my reasonable minimum number is 140.5. My reasonable maximum number is 296. So any number smaller than 140.5 and any number bigger than 296 are outliers. Still, I figured out my outlier is 110. That's why I said even though the Q1 was different on StatCrunch versus doing it by hand, it still gave us the same outlier. So I did forget to go over here and plot my outlier. So here is, and you can tell it's not a whole lot different. It's not a whole lot different. Okay. I wanted to show you that this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to show you how to do it on StatCrunch. So let's run over here. Here's the data that's on StatCrunch. I've already calculated the minimum, the 5-number summary. So I've already calculated the 5-number summary. Now to do the histogram, I'm going to go to graph, not the histogram, I'm sorry, the box plot. I'm going to go to graph, I'm going to go down to box plot. And the settings are pretty understandable. Which set of data do you want to use? And it doesn't matter, it's the same set of data. So we'll just use the one that was given to us. You do want to use outliers, and we want our boxes drawn horizontally, because if you don't pick this, and our box and whisker plot's gonna be going up and down rather than side by side. So I'm gonna press compute. Now, this is what it comes up with, and you're like, well, that doesn't look very much like ours. Well, that's just simply because the x-axis is not labeled. First of all, I can drag this out and make it a little bit longer. But if you want the x-axis on this to look exactly like yours, oh, and by the way, when you hover over it, it shows you that the IQR is 39. It shows you that the lower limit is 187, Q1. It gives you all your pieces of information. All right, now it doesn't tell you which one is which, so you have to know that this is the min, this is Q1, this is Q2, this is Q3, and this is Q4. I want to show you that you can, not Q4, maximum, sorry, minimum, Q1, Q2, Q3, maximum. And all of that information is on there when you hover over it. You can change the x-axis scale. You click on the pancake right here, and you tell it to go to the x-axis, and you just tell it, my graph started at 100, so I'm going to change that to 100, and my graph went up to 265. And then if you want to even do tick marks, you can say, okay, I want one at 115, comma, 130, comma, 145. I'm not going to do the rest of it because I think you get the hang of it. I'm going to press OK, and it shows you right here. So if we continued along, you know, that whole thing would be tick marked, would be numbered and stuff. So anyway, that's how you do a box and whisker plot on StatCrunch. I will show you also real quick that when we did this statistics summary right here, when we go over to columns and we tell it to do our Q1, our minimum, maximum, our 5-number summary, notice that IQR is right there. So if you want to calculate IQR, you can. Uh-oh, I forgot to tell it which set of data. It figures out the IQR. Now remember, that's because they used that weird way to compute the Q1. All right, so I'm going to stop this video, and we will do the last section of this lesson on the next one, which is about z-scores. So one more video.